Lawyers of Reddit, what's the stupidest case you've been asked to take on and did you? My father is a patent attorney, and when I was around 14 he told me about a guy who wanted to patent the iPhone 3 because aliens had given him the design for it. My father told him that if the aliens originally designed then they were the ones that had to patent it, not him. I'm a prosecutor, so I don't get hired to represent anyone. I work for the government, but I do have discretion over how the prosecution progresses, i.e. deciding to proceed, deciding what to offer in the event of a plea bargain, deciding to withdraw the charges, etc. I had a case a few months ago where a man was charged with shoplifting. Turned out he was 70 years old, had absolutely no criminal record, and had shoplifted a sandwich which he ate politely in the store. He honestly thought he had paid for it. I was so angry that he was ever charged in the first place. When I saw him in court, he was absolutely terrified. I withdrew the charges and wished him well. I have no idea how it progressed that far. I had a client come in saying that he needed to sue Stu for robbing all his checks. When I asked him if Stu had a last name, he said no. When I asked him if he knew any Stu, he said no. When I asked him what proof he had that Stu was robbing him, he showed me all of his pay stubs. There were clear monthly deductions by Stu. As soon as I saw it, I knew. I asked, do you have children? He said yes. I then told him your Stu is the SCU, the support collection unit. They take money out of your check to pay for your child. He left the office insisting that we needed to find Stu. I did insurance defense for a long time, including insurance fraud investigations for insurance companies. You won't believe how many people take a video inventory of their house, only to have it mysteriously burn down the next day. You really can't fix stupid. Woman wanted me to sue McDonald's because their employees beat up her son, who was trying to rob the place. Reminds me of the /r/legal thread where a parent was asking about suing a girl who had punched her son and broke his nose. But looking through the poster's history, it was clear that the son had been punched while attempting to sexually assault the girl. When I was in law school I did the criminal defense clinic where we help a public defender. I say help because they just give you small cases to do by yourself. I had a guy accused of shoplifting a yellow Fubu shirt. Guess what he wore to the trial? A GD yellow Fubu shirt. I asked the prosecutor to reoffer the plea deal. She did, and I convinced the guy to take community service and probation. If I remember correctly, our public defender system is tragically overworked and underfunded. Probably too late here, but I was a civil rights investigator. We had one guy complain that he was fired from his factory job because of his race. He was black. Owner of the factory said it was because the guy was smoking crack on his lunch break. Turns out he was smoking crack on his lunch break, but so were a few of his white co-workers and they were not fired. The owner agreed to pay the guy 6 months of back pay and give him a neutral reference. I was working in a law firm and got a call from reception advising that someone had arrived needing some intellectual property advice. I arrived at reception to find a clearly disturbed woman with a persistent facial twitch and a small wheeled suitcase. I took her to a conference room to discuss, making sure I kept a good line of sight to reception. She put the suitcase on the table and opened it to reveal a stack of thousands of handwritten pages and one half of a pair of scissors. So I guess a scissor? She explained that she had written a manuscript about how the city council gave her schizophrenia and hepatitis, aliens stole her pets, and that it was all part of a bigger conspiracy involving the army and the Illuminati. She was worried that our local newspaper was going to steal her thoughts and publish her manuscript without her consent, and wanted to register the copyright in her manuscript. We then had a perfectly rational and reasonable discussion about copyright laws. I explained that in our jurisdiction she didn't need to register it, and that she had rights as an author automatically on creation of the work. I told her the most useful thing she could do is ensure she had evidence of her creative work, and that she should send a digital copy to herself and a friend, and also leave a copy with a friend. That way if it was published without her consent she could prove it was her work. We spoke for nearly an hour. She thanked me and then left. She got free legal advice, and I didn't get stabbed with a scissor. I hope she found the help she needs. Edit. Assumed this would get buried. I was a junior and just tried to treat the client with respect and empathy. Scissor gave me pause, but never felt in danger. Was relieved she had a real legal question and we focused on that, rather than her delusions, and in that sense it wasn't a stupid case. I will say this, as a society, we don't do enough to look after our most vulnerable people, including those with serious mental health issues. Edit 2. Thanks for my first gold, kind stranger. I had a teacher that worked for a major video game publisher, one of the top 10 ones. He told me that when people tried to sue them for small amounts due to some game being bad, they would just pay whatever the person wanted. It was cheaper than dealing with the country's terrible justice system. Except one day a guy sued them because a game was bad. He was a law student, self-representing, and tried to throw the book at the company. They decided to make an exception for this guy. They instead threw the book back at him. The lawsuit kept escalating until both sides wasted lots of time and money. Then as final stroke, they offered to settle in front of a judge. They're in front of the judge. They put the price of the game on the table in cash and told the guy to just take it and stop bothering them. The judge thought it was very fair and told the guy that if he refused that settlement he would be fined. Guy was very unhappy. He spent like $5,000 in bureaucracy and airplane fares to get $60. I'm a lawyer, but this happened to a friend of mine. He got engaged and apparently this pissed off his ex-GF. The ex-GF sued him for custody of their 2 cats and $500,000 for something like the lost value of the cats because she claimed they were service animals. Hint, they were not at all service animals. Edit, wow, this got a lot of attention. So, to add to the story, one of the reasons my friend broke up with the ex-GF was because she had problems caring for the cats, ignoring them, forgetting to feed them while my friend was away, etc. So her coming back for the cats was clearly all about the fact that my friend was suddenly engaged to someone else. When they went to court, the judge immediately threw out the $500,000 demand because it was ridiculous. Unfortunately, they were awarded joint custody of the cats, which was this woman's way of staying in my friend's life. So he decided it was better if he just gave her the cats so he could be free of her. My aunt and uncle got divorced, and it was really quite civil and polite. They were and are still friends, so it was all very clean as divorces go. The odd bit was the cat custody stipulations. Both huge cat people, and they had 2 beloved felines. They went to live with my uncle, but full visitation rights for my aunt. This was not because of any trouble between them. It was my aunt wanting to ensure that any future notional partner my uncle got would not be able to stop cat visits if so inclined. Guy I know worked for the DPP and told me about a case where a guy was up on car theft charges, which is like 5 years maximum, but he was very likely to get a suspended sentence / probation as it was a first ever offense. The dumbass though thought it would be a good idea to go and intimidate the witness into not testifying. The witness called the cops and had CCTV footage of this, so he copped an extra charge with a 20-year maximum, and there was no way in hell he was getting a suspended sentence or probation on that one. Not a lawyer yet, but this happened while I was doing my 1L summer internship. I worked at a law library in a county lockup. There were plenty of interesting stories. One I already posted, but I figured I would share another. I also have no privilege issues. An inmate was charged with felon in possession and was coming down almost weekly to do research. He was basically looking for a way to get rid of a Walmart receipt and video which indicated that he had purchased a box of bullets, giving officers cause to search and find the weapon. One day, he brings in one of the law books he purchased and had reviewed. He pointed to the section that discussed reasonable expectation of privacy and argued that the officers had not asked his permission to view the video and thus had invaded his privacy. I pointed to parts of the book that explained reasonable expectations, still wasn't getting it. Finally, I asked him who owned the video. Walmart. Then won't it be their decision? But it's me in the video. Whose video is it? Rinse and repeat for about 5 minutes before he finally huffed off. A lady once called asking us to sue her neighbors. They were using voodoo on her. Fortunately, she had psychic powers and thus knew what they were doing. I respectfully declined. Client wanted to sue because there were no strawberries in her fruit salad which she bought from a supermarket. Thankfully a secretary was able to screen the call. She asked if the package said it had strawberries, and the response was, no, but I thought it would have. I don't know how these people manage to make it through life. Without going into too many details, had a guy that wanted to bring a class action against the company that made his underwear because he was convinced his underwear was the reason he had a crooked deck. He assured us that as soon as the jury saw his deck, they'd side with him. No, we didn't take it. I worked as a receptionist at a small personal injury firm and was the first line of defense against the more outlandish cases. One of the most ridiculous calls I took involved a woman wanting to sue her cat's veterinarian for malpractice because her cat scratched her, which in turn supposedly caused her liver to fail and a slew of other health problems to arise. She believed the vet was at fault because she was convinced the cat was carrying some obscure disease and the vet had failed to catch it. It was my second day on the job, so I put her through to an attorney, not yet knowing what else to do with such a ridiculous situation. She got a firm sorry, can't help ya from our office, in part because we did not do malpractice, veterinary or otherwise, but also because she sounded like a one-way ticket to crazy town. Edit, as some have pointed out, the woman may have actually had cat scratch fever, which could in theory lead to a legitimate claim. However, when she called, she presented it as I got sick, and then someone told me it was from my cat. My vet never told me my cat was sick. Can I sue him for malpractice? And apparently vets do not regularly test for cat scratch fever unless you bring your cat in for certain symptoms. This was clearly an I see a chance for a cash payout situation, and we would get calls like that all the time with both bizarre and banal stories behind them. Either way, she would have needed someone more specialized than the firm I worked for, which primarily handled car accidents and zero cats. I'm a personal injury lawyer in the UK. I took a call from a potential client that had fallen down the stairs in her own home. She had tripped over her own cat. She told me that she wanted to sue her local authority as her home was owned by the council and she was not allowed to keep pets as part of her lease. She claimed that when the house was inspected she was not told to get rid of the cat. It was therefore the council's fault that she fell down the stairs. We didn't take the case on. Edit, formatting and some tidying up. My mother said that at a law firm she used to work at many years ago they had received a call from a gentleman that wanted to file a lawsuit against Walt Disney. When asked why he was filing suit he claimed that the Disney characters were coming out of the TV and stealing food from his refrigerator. They told him they'd take the case for an advance fee of $100,000 and never heard back from him. A guy found a rock in the middle of Melbourne CBD that he believed came from an underground volcano, therefore he discovered the volcano and he owned the volcano, and that the Melbourne City Council and indeed the Victorian government should pay him rent to live on top of his underground volcano. No, I did not take on the case. I'm in immigration, so most of my stupid cases involve people trying to con the system or forgot to tell a smarty real information. One lady stood out, though. She was referred to us as a pro bono case. She was filing for asylum based on the fact that she's a Chinese national and she's also a devout Christian. If she was sent back, she would be persecuted based on religious reasons. So nothing weird up to this point. She provided me with statements about how she and her family were harassed by the local police and how certain members of her congregation were arrested. So I'm looking at the statements and the names and places sound familiar. Sure enough, a quick googling showed this was one of the board stories. Essentially what happens is there are people on the internet that sells these packages of fake documents and stories for a successful asylum case. From what I've heard, it usually is a real case that was successful, and someone got a hold of the supporting documents and started mass producing them and selling them. I'm guessing you're supposed to change the names from the original, but this lady didn't. Another red flag was the fact that in her supporting documents, the witnesses kept referring to her in the male form. At first I thought the English translation had typos, but yeah, same thing in the original Chinese ones. I always thought it was more of an urban legend amongst immigration lawyers. Needless to say, I did not take her case. I was called by a gentleman, I use the term loosely here, who wanted me to get his son-in-law out of jail from a drug possession charge. Before I could respond, he starts spilling the story. Police were called to the mobile home park for a domestic disturbance between the man and his wife. Call said he was beating the hell out of her in the front yard for the whole neighborhood to see, and they had better hurry. When they arrive on site, the man has calmed down and is sitting in his truck smoking a cigarette, and the woman was bloody, couple of broken bones, if I remember correctly, but was screaming from the front porch and throwing his personal items out the front door. As is regular habit, first thing the police do is ask if there are any firearms around they need to worry about, since she has gone back inside. The man says no, his pistol should be in the box on the back seat. Police ask him if they can open the box to verify it was there. He says sure. When they did, they find no gun, but lots of drugs. He says, oh right, gun's under the passenger seat. Police retrieve the gun and take him into custody for the drugs. What makes this the stupidest case is that I got my call from the man's father-in-law, who wanted to hire me to go get the guy out of jail and defend him on the charges. I thought a minute about the parties, then asked, if he is your son-in-law, then won't your daughter be the woman who he was beating? He said yay, but he is probably the best she is going to do for herself. I did not take the case because I'm a patent lawyer. I don't practice criminal or family law, and definitely do not want to. Sometimes you have no choice but to take it. I represented a guy who sold and leased cars. A woman worked for a company that let her drive a company van to work as part of a carpool effort. She'd keep the van at home and picked up fellow workers to go to work, then bring them back to their homes. One day going to work, she was stopped at a stoplight. Some guy didn't stop in time and bumped into the van. She got out to look. She and the other guy agreed no damage, so each went on his / her way. Later, a woman who is a passenger discovered she was injured. Went to a lawyer. The lawyer sued the company, the driver, and every passenger in the van. The lawyer deposed each passenger, got the name of their auto insurance company, sent a demand letter for coverage. One of the passengers said, I don't have a car, but my sister does. So they sued the sister. She said, I don't have insurance because I lease the car and they provide insurance. So the lawyer sued my client and sent a demand letter for insurance coverage. One prospective client wanted me to sue Burger King for no longer serving pancakes. Edit. Thank you for all your concern and tips. This was about 18 years ago, so I hope my client found a lawyer and you are all the beneficiaries of his foresight and proper sense of outrage. My dad is an in-house lawyer for a major American insurance company. He once spent an entire year trying to help deny insurance benefits for a painter who had stepped off his ladder onto a cat, fallen down the stairs and become paralyzed. The insurance company was arguing that a cat was a commonly expected occupational hazard for a painter, and that he was negligent in not checking for cats before stepping down. A whole year of his life over whether a cat is an known occupational hazard of house painting. Lawyer for 12 years. Client was charged with stealing a mobile toilet. After we won, he told me he still owns it. The fricker has the thing in his backyard. Because he was lazy as frick, his office was nearby. Forced him to deliver it back at night. Jesus. Still offended that he lied to me the whole time. Guy was arrested for marijuana possession. Arresting officer never actually opened the tinfoil bundle involved and checked that it was, in fact, not a burrito. Edit. Judge tossed the case. It was a misdemeanor. They don't go CSI and reach back to any collected evidence. Just roll their eyes and let everyone go home in situations like this. When I was a summer associate, I worked on a case where a lady was suing her apartment complex because she walked out of her unit, slipped on duck poop, and injured herself. We repped the apt complex. The associate I was working for told me to slip as many bird-based puns into the motions/pleadings as possible. I happily obliged. Let me preface this. I had heard about the guy I'm going to mention below before I had actually met him. I thought this was an urban legend until he came into my office one day. A guy in his late 50s/early 60s comes into the lobby area of my office and starts a commotion that freaks out the receptionist. I was the closest attorney to the lobby, so I go out and talk to the guy. He was clearly mentally disturbed and presented the following story. Someone had implanted a device in his brain that was controlling his behavior. He believed it was being controlled by Baskin-Robbins and the former mayor of Detroit. He believed they were forcing him to do random things like going to bars to drink, taking the wrong turn when driving, forcing him to retire from his job, and a lot of very other intricate things. After asking him if he had seen any doctors regarding the implant, he got really upset and said that he thought the doctors were in on it as well. After telling him I couldn't help him and suggesting that he find some new doctors, he asked me if I knew any lawyers who specialized in his kind of case. I often wonder if the lawyer I referred him to was able to help him. I run a consumer advocacy firm. I had a client come in and tell me that he bought a product and the company refused to honor the warranty after the product broke. I asked for details and he just started screaming in my face asking if I was going to take his money or not. I decided then that I wasn't taking him on as a client, but I wanted to know what was going on. I convinced him to tell me what happened. Turns out he bought a computer back in the 1990s. It had just recently died. But not because it was old and just stopped working. It was slow, so he picked it up and threw it out at a story window. And then he wanted to sue the manufacturer for breaking warranty. Edit. Well, there goes my inbox. I used to be a forensic social worker at a public defense organization, i.e., the people who provide lawyers for poor people when they get charged with crimes. You would not believe how many people believed that filing a police brutality lawsuit would result in their criminal charges going away. I mean, yes, police brutality is real, but you totally still committed a crime. Not a lawyer, but worked for a large national insurer who dealt with frivolous lawsuits frequently. Idiot is visiting friends in the country and gets drunk, decides to wander across the street to the driveway of a farm, ignores the multiple signs that say no trespassing and beware dog in both English and Spanish. Gets to the end of the driveway and there's a large dog chained to a post in the front yard barking its head off at him. Farmer comes out and tells the idiot to stay away from the dog. Idiot says something to the effect that has good with dogs and tries to pet the dog. Dog takes off his finger and the idiot drops his beer bottle as he runs back the way he came. Owner tries to save the finger for reattachment, but the guy disappears, and so the farmer turns everything over to the police. Shortly thereafter we denied the idiot's claim and he lawyers up. Every time he lawyered up, we'd send the documents to the lawyer. Lawyer would review and then drop the case. Happened multiple times. Idiot insisted we needed to pay for his emotional trauma. SMH. I defended a guy who was charged with theft for stealing some crowbars. The crowbars were found in the back of his pickup truck. At the trial, the victim of the theft and two of his buddies came in and testified that the crowbars, which had been taken into evidence and properly labeled for the trial, definitely belonged to the victim, and the buddies remembered seeing the victim use them. Then my client and his brother and his girlfriend testified that the crowbars were definitely my client's. They had all been using them together earlier in the day. That was pretty much it. The jury found my client not guilty, and one juror later wrote a letter to the judge saying that she was a high school civics teacher and she believed jury duty was very important and that the trial was the stupidest waste of time she had ever endured.